What's going on, everybody? It's Johnny King with another episode of the Johnny King Show. And I'm so stoked to have Jesse Simpson as my guest. He is the founder of Action Oriented and Action Adventures, host of his own podcast, The Action Hour. What's going on, man? Thanks for being here.
Johnny, I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're a transformational coach as well, correct? And then, like, I think I saw on Instagram, you facilitate retreats. You got a lot of stuff going on, man.
I do have a lot of stuff going on professionally. I've started this podcast. I'm leading these adventure travel retreats. And yes, I do work as a life transformation coach, but I just got a house and a puppy and I'm settling down and here in Lakeland, Florida, and everything is just coming at me full speed, but I'm super grateful. I feel really good as I move forward. It's like everything that I've been trying to create in my life is now coming and I'm allowing myself to receive it. So it's been really such a gift.
That's so cool. You know that, you know how they say, if you want something done, give it to people who are extremely busy. You know, you're extremely busy, and then you throw a puppy on top of that, right? A brand new, what would you say, golden doodle or?
Yeah, golden doodle. He's like 11 weeks old.
Oh man, still chewing up stuff.
He's pretty good, and my wife does a good job of managing him and giving him exercise. And we're taking this class right now. It said 90% of behavioral problems from dogs is from not enough exercise. So we're trying to give him as much as we can.
It's funny when I watch like Dog Whisperer and everything else, like so much of it talking about psychology always comes back to him training the adults, not the dog, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The dog is so interesting. And that, I mean, I think that is why I love psychology, and maybe you do too. It's like, man, the results, whatever results you have in your life, are a result of your own programming or your own training, whether it be conscious or subconscious, right?
Yep,
so
100%.
We got into a really good conversation the other day when we were chatting, hear more about your story, which is so fascinating. And man, it's interesting just to see the man that you are today, given how you very well could not even be here, you know, given the shit that you've took on, right? And the loss and the tragedy and the trauma and everything else. But maybe you can give the listeners just a little bit more of your background, your story. And I'd love to kind of ask questions as we get through it, because it's a fascinating story. But where would you like to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, so my name is Jesse Simpson. I'm a former Marine Corps combat veteran. I was a Arizona State Firefighter of the Year. I worked for 4 years as a firefighter, and but my life really didn't start out so bright, and I was nearly written off as a failure at a young age. You know, so we're gonna get to this, Johnny, but I'll start off with that because I think that sums it up quick in one sentence, like my past. So I had everything I ever wanted I served 4 years in the Marine Corps. Had my dream job as a firefighter. And then it was all saving me in a way from this troubled childhood that I came from. And, you know, I was suicidal when I was in 7th grade. It was 9/11 that really, I was in 7th grade on 9/11 that September. And that really saved my life in a way. It gave me somebody to serve that was larger than myself. For the first time. I didn't know what that really meant. I didn't have those words, but that's what it really came out to be. And that's why I wanted to become a Marine firefighter. But what I didn't realize is that those same, as we talk about subconscious cycles, you know, those same cycles were going on in my life. You know, so I was the firefighter of the year, but I was smoking weed at work and I was completely depressed. I was overwhelmed. I was a machine gunner in the Marine Corps, and I shot machine guns at other people. And there was something that clicked inside of me in 2017, October of 2017, when that guy shot a machine gun at people in Las Vegas, Nevada at the country music concert. You know, and it just really set me back. And my business was the business I felt like my whole life was preparing me for. I pulled the brakes on that thing, you know, and, you know, all these things were piling up on me. And that trigger, I was like, what is going on here? You know, and I sat back and I went back into myself, and I realized as I started to have suicidal thoughts again, as a 28-year-old man, the firefighter of the year, I was having the same suicidal thoughts I did when I was in 7th grade. And I knew that if I didn't change my life and create something new with my life, that this would be my destiny. So that sort of sums up my past in a way. But now I'm a transformational life coach and adventure travel retreat facilitator. Like you said, I'm hosting the Action Hour podcast. I believe that action is the greatest adversary of adversity. And I believe that it's never too late to transform your life. And so that's what I help people do. So that's really a bit about me, who I was, and now who I am.
It's an incredible story. I mean, I think what's interesting is to see how, you know, again, what the level of success you were able to accomplish, even given the shit that was going on in your head, that you still were able to perform. And on the outside, people are like, what? You having suicidal thoughts, or you're unhappy? Like, what are you talking about? You have such, yeah, again, quote unquote, success, and yet you were really, really struggling. What do you feel like was at the root of, whether when you were in seventh grade, when you were in 28, just like the suicidal thoughts? Was it a lack of self-worth and feeling like there's no real purpose, or was it something from your past that was just kind of eating away at you, or what was it, do you feel like?
I didn't feel like I was good enough.
Mm,
And I think that comes down to, I mean, my I say troubled childhood. It started, my parents split up when I was 7. My older brother got really terminal cancer when he was 14. I was like 8, and so my mom was super stressed. She was trying to she opened up this daycare. She was working full time there, trying to manage, like, she was an oncology nurse and opened up this childcare. And then my brother got cancer, so it was all that. And my dad had moved away. I just felt so unloved, and I wasn't getting the attention. And I felt thinking that moment, not good enough. And it was, I went up to my room after a fight with my mom, that summer before 7th grade, with a butcher knife, digging my wrist, wishing I was dead. And I thought about my mom and what she was experiencing, and the frustration. And like, I always felt like responsible for how unhappy she was and her sadness. And I I absorbed that. And
mhm.
so I was like, I'm better off dead. And that was like my mentality. But I was getting in fights all the time. I was kicked out of school regularly for smiting, for fighting, smoking weed, cussing out teachers,
Mhm.
and it was just this constant feeling of not being good enough, making people unhappy, which led to me acting out. And really, I mean, that in a way led to this sort of this this desire to create attention that wasn't the good the what really I wanted. I was getting in trouble all the time. I was getting all this attention from people
Mhm.
who I probably shouldn't be around, and
Right,
it was
right.
and that was like the path I was on. But I fast forward a bit, my freshman year, I was kicked out of my house. And so I remember going down after this fight with my mom, and she was laying on the couch crying, and she's like, call your dad. You're not welcome here anymore. And so that was like a turning point in my life where I was in a way like kicked out or abandoned or disowned by my own mother after feeling all this way leading up to that, I think had led to this constant drive for doing things to fill my life, with,
Mhm.
in a way, distractions. But like you said, it has led to this sort of success. I was a Marine of the Quarter. I was a infantry machine gun squad leader. Like, I'd done all these things, but it's like I was never addressing the root of how I was feeling. And I think that is why it continued. It drove me, but it's also why when I got to everything, this dream life I thought I had always wanted, like, I always wanted to be a Marine, a firefighter. And now here I was, a firefighter of the year, speaking in front of hundreds of firefighters at the state fire school, talking about leaving a legacy, and legacies aren't written in how you die. They're written in how you live your life. And I really own that. And I believe that. I had my dream girl. Everything on the outside was perfect. But, then about a month later in October 2017, when all these things kind of came crashing down, I realized that the same cycle was going on. And I think it was all at the foundation of it is like a feeling of not being good enough.
Mhm.
I was not willing to receive what I really wanted. I didn't feel like I was worthy of that.
I think so many people, I mean, uh, my humble opinion, what I've learned from Tony Robbins is that, all of our 2 deepest fears are the same, that we're not enough and that we won't be loved, and that the fear of not being loved is like, I would rather die then, right? Um, than to be unloved in this experience. So I feel like so many people would resonate with this story, which is why I was so excited to have you on. But then how do you work through that? So many people again know, like, yeah, just work on self-love, work on self-care. But like, to me, that's a lot of just talk, but there's not always a ton of experience or support. And like, this is how you improve your self-esteem or sense of self-worth. How have you found yourself working your way through the last several years to find a greater sense of, stability and worthiness?
I think that's a great question, Johnny. And I think I hear you asking that question, what comes up for me is when I was getting out of the Marines, actually it was about 10 years ago in January, about this time last month, it was 10 years. I was craving the structure and sense of purpose and the camaraderie that comes with like this unmistakable sense of structure and purpose and camaraderie that comes with life in the military.
Yeah.
I left with no real direction. I was coming pretty headstrong after my third deployment of combat tour to Afghanistan, and I thought I could take on anything. And I pretty much fell right on my face. And I started to really, all these things started to catch up with me then, anger, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse. And I didn't really have any direction or purpose at all. And I really felt that the loss of that. But then in January of 2013, so about 2 years struggling through all this, going to community college, I was fortunate enough to go on this volunteer trip to Lima, Peru, and work at this orphanage. I thought about on the way down there, on this flight down there, I couldn't wait to get down there and help these kids. But after these 2 weeks of playing with these kids who had nothing but sticks and balls and dirt, it was clear that they helped me.
Yeah, totally.
They changed me. And so it did a lot of things for me. And I think about that trip often. But the first thing is it got me over myself. Like I was feeling all this shit. Like I felt not good enough, all these things. But then I was able to go down there and just make these, play with these kids and make them happy. And we just had all this play with sticks and balls in the dirt and had the biggest smiles. But it also started to shift something in me, and it started to lead me to have more questions than I did answers. So it was more like wait, I'm coming from the States and I believe that we're the best country in the world, and everything, I can go on this predictable, this pathway to success. It's guaranteed to make me so happy, money, cars, whatever it would be. But then I am with these kids who are literally the happiest kids that I've ever been around, and they have like nothing to show for, nothing, no material wealth really of any kind. I saw their house; they lived in literal shacks, and it started to really help me start to question my reality and like the life I was leading into. And so I think the first thing that comes up for me is this idea that if we don't really believe we're good enough, we just need to go serve other people, whether it's these kids in a different country, but you don't have to do that. There's people that are in need right now in your community. So I think by giving of yourself, by serving, then you can really find value in yourself. And I think a lot of times that's what we're missing, especially when we feel like we're not good enough and we're drinking, locking ourselves in our own room. We get broken up and no one loves us or whatever it is. We just get so wrapped up in ourselves. But if we can get out in the world, out in the community, out to help somebody else that's on the same path, to just a few steps behind, or even just like be next to someone who's going through the same thing, we can really find value in ourselves. And that's the first thing. And the second thing I think is a willingness to challenge your limited beliefs that say that you're not good enough, because it's not true. And the challenges I was starting to challenge what I thought success was, my definition of success. And then it eventually came to this T, and I had to make some serious changes in my life. And now I feel more free, more alive, more complete than I ever have in my life. But it was because I challenged what I thought was possible for me.
I think that's pretty just so spot on, because I feel like, again, if you're in this place of suffering, right? And I make the distinction between suffering and pain, because I feel like pain is inevitable in this human experience, and that pain, a lot of it is what drives growth, right? Like, I know going into the gym is like the muscle demands some level of resistance, pain for it to grow. But then the suffering is more, I feel like a massive obsession with oneself. It's selfishness, it's fear. It's like, I'm not good enough. But I found the same thing that kind of broke me out of my funk when my world came crumbling down, similar around the time that yours did too, in my life, was, like you said, like giving, and I honestly felt like I got that message from God, because I don't think I would have come up with that myself. I would have stayed in that hellhole for a while. But I feel like, again, you're one of the few who, in that space of like, I hate myself or I hate this life or whatever, for whatever reason, you were, motivated to go down to Lima, Peru, which is incredible, right? To actually be able to give. So you had that heart always, it seems like, to really want to serve. But how is it that what was it that actually motivated, when you were in your shittiest of shitty places, to actually, to go all the way down to South America? Were you needing the environmental change? Was it just a calling? What was it for you to actually get out of yourself and go give? Because I think that's incredible that you're able to do that.
So in that time, like 2013, I I thought I had seen the world. I've done some traveling in the Marines, and I think as I was going to school, I still wanted to be a firefighter. When I was back in that time, it was just a call to adventure. Like it felt right. Like go volunteer in Peru. It was just like a setup at the community college I was going to, and so it was really just this call to service, um, a call to experiencing the world in a more real and tangible way. And I mean, that experience led to like hundreds of hours of volunteer experience at the Phoenix Children's Hospital. Worked at a grief camp for kids. I was a youth mentor for 3 years. Like it was like the start of a journey that really changed my life. And I mean, I think that's what it was. It was like a trusting of my intuition. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's like you need to go there. And so it was maybe the first time that I like really felt that, and I leaned into that, and I didn't know what was going to happen.
Mm.
And it has been something that, I mean, it literally changed the course of my life. And I think it was just on trust that just go for it. Just give it a try.
That's so cool. Well, I think that's the because I think people want a 1, 2, 3 step. Like just if you want to love yourself, do this, do that, and the thought is like I've got to keep focusing on myself when truly the answer is to go serve others, not to go look for your answer in others. Even though you really kind of got it because you said it was almost like the kids really helped you versus you helping them, right? But it's kind of like that symbiotic relationship of healing there and service. But then you said the number two was more about like challenging that definition of success, right? Like the whole idea of success. And I saw something by Gary Vee the other day on social media, and he's like, dude, until we as a country or as a world start to challenge that definition of success, where it's not all about the money and all the things that kind of America and the American dream resembles, we'll never find happiness, true happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you've really kind of stepped your way into that, maybe by going down to South America and seeing or traveling the world, right? And now you're doing retreats out of the country and just kind of reconnecting with things that are beyond the old school definition of success here in the US. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, as you say that, it makes me think of the word freedom.
Yeah.
And I thought that freedom was something that I got by living in the United States. But then I came back and I was living this life, and I was like a prisoner to my mind and my body, my thoughts and my emotions, and I was completely ran and driven by
Mm.
them. And so, if we fast forward a bit on this sort of journey, 2013, that started to shift some things in me. But I still kept living my life. I still finished my degree, and then I became a firefighter in 2014, and my dream job. And my eyes started to wake up to the gap in the mental health space that like I don't think most people know this, but like 80% of fire calls that I went on were mental health in nature, ranging from drunks and addicts in the streets to suicides and overdoses in people's homes. I've seen people hang from the rafters. I've seen people who put a gun to their head, and I started to really feel that. And then 2016, my best friend from the Marines died of a heroin overdose. So I'm going on these heroin overdoses, and then it's like they're like my best friend, and every day I'm reminded of that, and it's this cycle that's going on. And then if you fast forward a bit, this experience where I was a firefighter of the year, and then I crumbled this really dark space, and I had these cycles going on. And they finally, for once, came to my awareness. You know, so I went on this journey after Peru, and I just kind of lived my life.
Mm.
But all the while, like underneath, I was thinking about Peru. Like it was always there. Like there was like a truth that I experienced while in Peru that time. And so as I was trying to figure out what the hell to do with my life, like I was like, there's no way that I can live this way for 20 more years. Just look forward to retirement, delay all these things, this happiness to retirement. And I really sat down into this. I mean, it went over a few months, but it basically came down to this point where I decided I'd measure my life by how much I give, how much I grow, and how far I go. Because this idea of service had been really kind of coming up for me over and over again. This idea of having more questions and answers and really challenging things. The status quo, what I thought success was there. And then I thought about how anytime that that time I went to Peru, or the time I went to the Marines, like just go for it. Like going for it really made huge changes in my life. And really what that meant for me in that moment was becoming a coach so I can be of service to others in their time of need.
Yeah.
The grow meant going to grad school so I can understand the world a bit better. And the go for me meant basically selling all of my things, resigning for what I once thought was my dream career, and taking pretty much a 2.5 year trip around the world. And it was so incredible for me as it all came full circle. I've been out of the country about 6 months at this point, but in January of 2019, I was back in Lima, Peru. And it was, back in the city that changed the course of my life. And everything now, it's like these cycles have been going on, but now this time the cycles were different. And it's, instead of being driven by my past, I was moving towards this life that I really wanted to create. So everything came full circle, and I went on this adventure of a lifetime. And something's coming up for me now. You talked a bit before about like not knowing how it's going to work out, and like that
Mhm.
has been my experience. Is when I decided that I didn't want to be here anymore, I wanted to create something new with my life, and I committed, and I didn't have any attachment to how everything was going to work out. Everything opened up, like
Mm.
literally the world opened up, and all these opportunities have just bounced me around the last 2.5 years. And now I'm here in Lakeland, Florida, a city I never heard of, 6 months ago.
Right.
And yeah, man, it's just been a hell of a ride.
It's crazy. I mean, you talk about, and I think that is so key because I've done it myself too. I know a lot of guys that I look up to and I aspire to be in contact with one day are all guys that had like a moment. They hit an emotional threshold moment where they detached themselves from the outcome and detached themselves from kind of the routine that they were going. You sold all your shit. Left my corporate business with no idea what I was going to do. Right. So it's like that surrendering to like, shit, I don't know what's going to happen. But it's so interesting how, again, when you really do surrender from having to have so much control over your life, even more amazing things happen. Right. Which I think is a good lead into what we were talking about before. And I've talked about it on my podcast earlier, with my mushroom experience, and how, again, I'm just mushrooms or psychedelics or marijuana. I've just started to dabble a little bit here and there as tools to help me access things that, quite frankly, I'm like, I know there's pain in there. I know there's anger, frustration, or there's disappointment, but how do I access that? And that, you told me the other day, like mushrooms really more of support me with my wounded child, which I'm like, yeah, that's actually been my experience. And ayahuasca, more your shadow. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more, given that experience that you've had, or those experiences you've had down in South America, more about your retreats, like the healing process, that maybe you can use some of these plant-based medicines to help support the healing. Because I think that's pretty powerful and really relevant for what's going on in the world right now for a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think running with that a bit, like what's going on in the world is just a physical like a real world movie of like what we are experiencing inside of ourselves, and so I mean, so June 26th of 2018, I bought a one-way ticket, or I went on this one-way flight to Costa Rica with no real plans of ever coming home.
Hmm.
I sold my car, like I said, all my stuff, and I was going for it. I had to create change in my life, and I did that. And I started my trip really that 2 months later in August at an ayahuasca retreat. And I heard about ayahuasca. I wasn't really sure what it was, and I felt called to it. At the retreat, the facilitator talked about, you never want to pressure anybody to go on this journey of this, because it's seriously powerful medicine, but you will be called to it when it's time. And that was my experience, and it just lined up that I would go to this. And that experience, I think about it often, and it was a f- an overwhelming feeling of just of love and compassion for myself, for other people, for the people who've helped me get to where I am, for the people who, it was also a feeling of a need, a calling to be present and grateful. Because on one of the experiences, I just saw this constant replaying of times in my life where people had helped me or given to me or they were there for me, but I was so in my own mind or so wrapped with other things that I was never really there. I never experienced that. And that just started to shift some things in me very, very deeply. And so in a way, that's how I started my journey. 2.5 years of pretty much nonstop traveling, and I started at ayahuasca retreat. And we spent 4 months in Costa Rica, 2.5 months backpacking through Peru. We lived in the Andes Mountains at a lodge basically for a month, and then went to Colombia. And Colombia, of all the places we went to, was just, it is such an incredible place. There's so many misconceptions about it that when you talk about Colombia, people think about narcos and the cartels and all this sort of stuff. But like really, the reality of Colombia is that it's the most incredible place. Medellin specifically was the most dangerous city in the world in the early 90s, and it transformed into the most innovative city in the 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
And the mountains outside of Medellin, Colombia are just incredibly beautiful. The coffee region in Colombia is amazing. Like the people there are the most warming and welcoming people you'll ever meet. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I got introduced to DMT in Colombia, and that just it shifted again in a deep transformational way, these experiences. And now that was 2 years ago. I was actually living there 2 years ago now. And I just knew that I had to bring this experience of real and authentic travel, of transformational travel, and combine it with this power of these plant medicines, these medicines that have been used in the Amazon jungle for hundreds, if not thousands of years, to other people, because it truly helped me heal my life, and I had been running from myself for all this time, acting like what was going on wasn't really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And these things brought it out, and they showed me that it's okay, and I think ayahuasca, like you said, is like it has a way of bringing out these shadow parts of yourself, these things you neglect, showing you that they're there, and allowing you an opportunity to forgive, to let go, to move on, to integrate whatever it is that you need. And and that's what I'm doing now. I mean, basically, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm now leading these adventure travel and sacred medicine retreats in Colombia, and it's such an incredible gift, and it's so powerful.
Well, I think you touched on it, which was like the first experience of that for you was like you had this profound feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, of just self-love, which is something you probably hadn't experienced a ton of, which is what you're saying was the problem with not feeling enough, right? And because you're not feeling enough, then you're constantly focusing on either the past or the future, but you're never in the present to even receive any love that you were getting. So it really brought you into the present moment, which I think is like that is the gift, to realize that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. I mean, you've experienced that with your loss of your bro, but it's like, man, like we harp on ourselves so much, and we get so hard on ourselves because we're being able to compare ourselves with everyone on the internet. And yet the really cool thing in my experience about this too is just that love and compassion that you can feel for yourself when you use the plant-based medicines. But it's also scary because I went through 3 hours of sitting in the woods, with some mushrooms and just crying tears of sadness. And it was really, really scary because it's like, I don't want to go there. But I think that's why a lot of people probably avoid it, because the shadow is, again, something right behind us that's always with us, but we never want to turn around and look at it. But it can be really scary, right? What have been some of those things that for you've had to really step into, which has been taking a lot of courage to face, which has allowed you then to see this the light on the other side? Are there any things that were really, really challenging in your experiences of plant-based medicine?
My experiences of plant-based medicine, I mean, I'll speak to the first experience I had. I remember the facilitators were playing music. I was a few hours into this trip or this ride, and I remember like clenching, and I was like, what is that noise there? Like the music they were playing was like really grinding. And um and really what I realized is the key is to surrender to that, to stop resisting. And
Mm,
I think this is analogous to anything we do in our life, is to not resist what is going on, not to try to rationalize our pain away, not to try to act like what we're experiencing is not the reality. Everything's amplified in those experiences.
mm-hmm.
But as soon as I like relax, and I was like, wait, this is actually happening for me. Like this is something, this grinding noise is a gift. As soon as I like relaxed in that moment, the music like changed and it went to something completely different. It was this amazing experience, and so that was one experience. And it's negligible. So some of the things people have experienced are is way more challenging than that. But I think always the answer in those moments with the medicine or with life is to let go, to surrender, to stop resisting what's going on. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just as soon as you do that, everything else gets easier. You get a moment of clarity where you can make the decision where the shift in your life, is it like things I have to do or things I get to do? Is this happening for me or to me? And those subtle changes in how we perceive our world change everything.
100%. I've talked about the work of Byron Katie in the past, a book that really helped me. I was working through my divorce and all the other shit that was happening in my life. One of her books is Loving What Is, which is like it, all the anxiety you're feeling, all the frustration is your resistance to what actually is
Mm.
happening. So just accept it rather than really wishing that it should be this way or I should be that way or this and that. And that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still struggle with that. I think we're human. We can easily fall back into that mode, but that is what I feel like is what you're saying is like it's the theme that keeps coming up in this journey, especially to personal development. Is like you have to be willing to surrender, which is super scary because we all want to just have control. But as soon as you let go of control, it sounds like you've been able to create tons of healing and you know miraculous experiences in your life. And that's, I assume that's because of those gifts. Like you said, you want to bring that to other people, correct?
Absolutely. I really believe that it's never too late to transform your life. And now, whether it's in the way I've done it, I always say, like, don't take on my dream, but the way
Mm-hmm.
that my dream has come to fruition is like through travel, transformational travel experiences. Really, I'm on a
Mm-hmm.
mission to change the way the world travels and help people get a real, authentic experience of the world. Because I think the the beliefs we've been the propaganda we've been force fed about how everything is the way it's like not true. It's actually not true. And it's really easy to see that for me once I come back after being abroad for so long and not watching the news, and then I tune into the news a little bit. I'm like what the hell is, like, what is that? Like, it's just
Yeah,
it's really off-putting to me,
it really is.
and but yeah, I mean, that's the experience that I want to create for other people. But I always say, like, whatever it is you want to go for, like, go for it, but
Yeah.
don't take on my path. You don't get to have my path. But if there's a calling to transform your life through travel experiences, or if this medicine is calling you, then, like, the experiences that we are creating with action adventures and these retreats in Colombia is like it's truly transformational. It will really help you heal, find out who you really are and why you're here, and change your life in a really lasting way.
Would you feel like some of these tools are accelerants? Like they just kind of accelerate the process of healing? Because I mean, you could spend 5 years on a couch with some therapist, or you could spend a week down in Colombia. Has that been that's been my experience? I was just wondering if that's been your experience as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there's a huge shift coming with how we view treatment
Yeah.
modalities, and these medicines, that they are tools. They
Hmm.
are tools that can help expedite these things. And we're kind of bouncing around this a little bit in this idea of fear, what keeps people, this resistance. It's our ego,
Hmm.
and it's
Hmm.
preventing us. Our mind has a way of creating problems for us and then keeping us busy and moving just enough forward so we feel like we're being productive, but then it sucks us right back into this cycle. That's what I would, is your ego, your shadow. It's keeping you stuck. Um, and these medicines have a way of kind of revealing these things for you. But across the board, there's all kinds of these different healing modalities. I'm on the board of directors for a nonprofit, and 220, and we have a process that eliminates PTSD in like one session. Most times it's more complex, up to three. But
Hmm.
literally, like, you don't have to spend 5 years going to prolonged exposure therapy talking about the traumas in your life. You
Hmm.
can sit down for basically like an hour and a half with me, and we can walk through this process, and it will sever the emotional connection to traumatic memories. But it's crazy to me because we have to, like, as I'm saying that, maybe someone who's listening to this might be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Or, I've been doing all this. You mean to tell me that you can just sit down with Jesse and it's all gone? I'm like, literally, yes, we can do this. But it's crazy because we have to, it's like we're in an insurgency,
Hmm.
because right now the paradigm says that you need medications, or you need years of this therapy, or you need X, Y, and Z. And we have to go in and fight against this system and say that these things are possible. We are actually healing people in very real and tangible ways, giving people their life back as it relates
Hmm.
to trauma, or whether it's or travel, separating the two. But like, there's a lot of things that are shifting in the world right now that people are saying weren't possible before.
Hmm.
And there's these tools, plant medicines, men's groups, all these different things, travel, and these different processes that are just really coming in. So if there's something that you're looking for, like, it's definitely out there. Go for it. That's like what I would always tell people.
Mm. What have been some of the things that you've, when we're talking about PTSD, that you've had to work through? Your buddy overdosing from heroin, things that you've seen overseas or at work as a firefighter. What have been some of those things that have been some of the more challenging, or just stuff from your childhood that you've had to to work through? Maybe not having your dad around, or what do you feel like has been some of the bigger blocks that you're like, ooh, when you shifted that, like shit really started to move in your life?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. So the first one that comes up for me, and I think it was like the underlying theme of my life was, like I said, I got kicked out of my house my freshman year in high school.
Mm.
And the reason I got kicked out of my house is because I punched my own mom in the face. I punched her and knocked her down, knocked her out basically. And that's
Mm.
when I came down a little bit later and she was on the couch crying, like, call your dad, you're not welcome here anymore. And rightfully so. Like you can't do that. I was completely reckless. I was out of control. And so I think then it was like this constant driving of like trying to prove myself that like I'm good enough, or like that I'm not a bad person, which
Mhm.
is what led to, this, let's say, success or Marine of the Quarter and Firefighter of the Year and all these different things. And so I think, and then I went on this journey. I was traveling around, but even actually this time last year, I was coming home and I had all this, like, I don't know, I learned about the inner child, right? And I learned about like all these different things that were kind of like driving me beneath the surface. Even if after all of this transformational travel experience that I went on, traveling abroad for so long and now backpacking across the states for a bit. And so I think that as it relates to this experience specifically, it was the understanding that I needed to forgive myself, like choosing forgiveness. And I learned that forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a decision.
Mhm.
It's not going to maybe feel good, but at the same time, like I had to let this go and move on and stop trying to like make up for it or whatever. And then I could let it go. So I think that was the big thing from my childhood. And that also, like, what we've learned actually with this process that literally eliminates PTSD, is that all these traumas and our emotions and limiting beliefs, they're not neurologically linked to like an origin, like a starting point. So something usually happens with the first 7 to 9 years of our life when we're really getting these beliefs programmed into us, or these emotions programmed into us. And whatever it was, maybe it was one of my parents were when I was 7, my parents split up, but I was always attracting these sort of experiences in my life, and that led to me punch my own mom in the face. And then
Mhm.
these experiences in the Marine Corps, um, I'm hesitant to share this because it's kind of like a weird thing to share, but like I said, I was a machine gunner in the Marines. I served in combat in Afghanistan. One of my first deployments actually, where we took contact and I was able to shoot back. They, I shot a M240 Bravo. It was the biggest machine gun we had on the patrol, and
Mm.
shot 7.62 caliber rounds. And after this firefight we got in, a local farmer brought his son in, about like an 8 to 10-year-old boy,
Mhm.
and he had been shot by a 7.62 caliber round.
Mm.
Now, I was the only one on my patrol that had that caliber machine gun. The only other possibility was that it was, like the Taliban, or who shoot AK-47s, which are also 7.62. And
Mm.
so then I always had this feeling like I had shot this kid, like
Mhm.
I'm trying to do this good and serve. And now this guy's coming in and saying, basically, at least how I felt was I shot his kid. So that was another thing that I had to work through.
Yeah,
And
jeez.
it was like a feeling of like nothing I ever do is right. And I think that was something that I moved forward and worked through. And then finally, one of my buddies, he said, like, why don't you let that go? Like, it's not like, as I tell this story, it's like it could be me or it could be the Taliban. You never know. But either way, I'm holding on to this experience. I've wrapped up in my own mind that it
Mhm.
was me, and I'm like feeling guilty and responsible for this, when it very well couldn't have been me. It might not have been me, and even if it was, how is it serving me to continue to feel this guilt? And I think, and then as we speak about trauma, like, I've seen some pretty horrific things, especially in the fire service. Like I said, people hanging from the rafters, like, people hit by drunk drivers, like young people hit, like, just I could go down this kind of rabbit hole. But
Mhm.
the reality is I don't really feel any of the triggering or trauma from that, the emotional experience, the intrusive thoughts or anything like that. I've let it go.
Yeah.
I felt a bit anxious as I was sharing that, but at the same time, like I've healed and I've let go and I've forgiven and I've moved on, and I'm not perfect, but I know, and because I know this is a process, but I also know that, if I get to choose that, if something no longer serves me, then I can let it go and I can leave it in the past where it belongs, and I can create a future that's different than that past.
Mhm.
That's what I'm after right now.
Totally. And I think you're absolutely right. The experience with the child, it's like, it could have been you, could have not been. Like, that's the horrible part of war, without a doubt. Um, but the bigger issue, like you said, is that it was re-triggering a belief that you never do anything right, and you're a fuck up, and you're not worthy of love, and yada 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 yada, right? But going back to what you said about forgiveness, because you had to forgive yourself for that eventually, right? But I'm interested to kind of dig into that a little bit here as we kind of start to wrap things up. Is like, forgiveness, like you said, isn't a feeling. You said it's a decision, and it may not feel good. But how do you then reconcile? Because a lot of times I feel like I can say I forgive someone, um, but then if it doesn't feel congruent, if I don't feel it, then I'm like, then it's just I'm just saying words, right? So how do you reconcile forgiving yourself or forgetting someone else when it doesn't feel good, but you're actually really moving forward with just making the decision, like, you know what, this doesn't feel good. However, I forgive you, and you're moving on. Like, how's that part of your process, your healing process, if it's not necessarily totally aligning with your heart and your mind? Does that make sense?
Well, I think the first thing that comes up for me is like a willingness to trust the process and understand that things are. I feel pretty confident now in my life that everything is happening as it should.
Yeah.
And even if I don't have all the answers right now, they will soon come to me. And
Mm.
I believe that. And so as it relates to that specifically, it's like maybe it's not time to forgive. Maybe you need to like stew on that a little bit more. But eventually, like when the time comes, you'll have an opportunity, and really I feel like you always have these opportunities coming up. And I feel like the volume of our pain gets turned up louder and louder until we realize what it is and we decided, turn it down or let go of it or whatever.
Mhm.
So if it relates to
Mhm.
forgiveness, or there's someone that did you wrong, feel angry all you want and do all the things you need to do to try to find the, the validation or whatever it is that you're looking for. But then once you realize it's not working, if it's not, then you'll have an opportunity to let it go. So I think that's a
Mhm.
willingness to trust the timing and understanding that everything's happening as it should. And and then if what you're doing is not working, then it's time to adjust and maybe let go or forgive or keep practicing.
100%. I think what's pretty cool about your experience through life thus far, and just again the man that you are as you sit here today, and I just want to thank you for being here and representing wholeness and humility and transparency and authenticity. Is like, man, the things that you've seen and dealt with, just as for however long, how many times you've gone around the sun, is kind of more likened to what past generations have experienced, in terms of how much trauma and death and loss that you've seen compared to most guys. I mean, I've had some loss, and yes, I've, some tragedy here and there, but for a lot of us, we're so far away from um, things going, war, right? Loss, although of course the world is kind of a crazy place now, and certainly it seems to be challenging in many different ways. But for you to have gone through what you've gone through, and then to be, still in your healing process, and that, I don't know if that ever really ends, but to be where you're no longer at that place where you're not sure if you want to live or not. Like, I think, I hope gives other people so much hope if they are listening to this and really struggling with their own sense of like mental health and self-worth, and like that it is possible. There's a process, there's a exact, science of A to B to Z, but you're saying surrender, give, be willing to face your fears, your shadows, do the work, use tools, use mentors, all those things that you've done that have allowed you to get beyond all those things that were limiting you, and ultimately really trying to pull you down and rob you of your gifts to shine. You know what I mean? So I just want to commend you on that, because I think it's pretty inspiring, really inspiring, to be able to stand and sit where you are today and be able to say, I've gotten through this stuff. Because that's a remarkable story. So I just really want to say thank you for sharing that and being open and vulnerable, even if it was tough to say some of the things. So I appreciate that, man, very much.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell me, as like I said, as we just kind of wrap things up, if people wanted to work with you, if they wanted to check out things going on down in South America, like, what are some of the options for just, it can be scary to take that next step, but that's the hardest step, I think, is just to get started. How do they do that with you and with your company and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may just jump on to what you're saying a little bit more, I think the
Yeah.
process that I found is that you get clear on what you want. If you want to have a future that's different than your past, just get clear on what you want. And then you take the first step without any real, you don't need to have control. Where the surrender comes is not having to have control, a definite plan on how you're going to
Yeah.
get from A to B. It's just take the first step. The next step always appears, and then be willing to receive it when it comes. I think
Amen.
those, if I were to have a 3-step process, it would be that: get clear on what you want, commit to seeing it through, and then receive it once it comes.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's the world that I live in now. And so if you want to get more, if you want to get in contact with me, probably the best place is on Instagram, action_Jesse. Shoot me a DM, shoot me a follow. I love engaging with people, talking about real life stuff. And if you were interested in the traveling or coaching and things that I offer, action-oriented.com has all that information on there. So I would love to connect with you. If this story resonated with you, if anything I've said resonated with you, if you want to join me on this journey down to South America, I'd love to have you. And I hope to hear from you soon.
That's amazing. Action-oriented.com, or on Instagram, you said action_Jesse, and that's JESSE.
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, for listening. Jesse, thank you so much for just giving all your gifts and supporting people just by letting your light shine. I know there's going to be those that have listened to this that'll reach out to me and say, hey, dude, that was an amazing, transformative podcast. I really appreciate it. And like I said, guys, reach out to Jesse, follow him on Instagram, action_Jesse, check out his website. Any parting, I mean, you've given us so much wisdom and action items, but anything else you wanted to say before we wrap?
I would just say it's never too late. It's never too late to transform your life. You know, it's a series of actions, and willingness to receive what comes is all you need. So I'd say go for it. Take action.
Amazing. Well, there you guys have it. Never too late to move forward. And if you're listening to a podcast like this, or listening to a podcast like Jesse's at the Action Hour, or the Action Hour, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to find your way, and I think you're surrounding and filling your head with the right things. So, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Johnny.
We'll look for, you bet. We'll look forward to catching up with you guys on another episode soon. And till next time, make it a great day.